Hey guys, Ultimate Deadpool here. So as you can tell by the title of the video, this is the Spider-Man No Way Home movie review. So this is how this is going to work. I'm going to do the review at the beginning of the video, and then I will let you guys know when spoilers are coming. So if you have not seen Spider-Man Home, please do not watch this video until after you have seen the movie. So, without further ado, let's get started. The special effects were really well done. The CGI was really good. The acting was really good. There were a few moments when it's like, okay, you know, that doesn't really make sense, but you know what, it does. The overall storyline was fairly easy to follow. Most of it made sense. All the actors that were in this film did really well as their respected versions of their characters. For instance, you know, Alfred Molina did really job coming back as Dr. Octopus. William Dafoe crushed it as being Green Goblin again. Jamie Foxx is much better in this movie than he was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Probably going to mispronounce her name, but Zendaya, she did really good as MJ. The actor who played Ned did really well. Tom Holland, if you guys like Tom Holland as Spider-Man, this is probably his best Spider-Man performance yet, which is great because his future looks very bright after this film. All the supporting characters and whatnot did their part, and they were really well thought out. Sandman and Lizard don't get as much screen time as you'd expect. It focuses more on, you know, Spider-Man or Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man's villains, which, you know, makes sense because they're better. And then Jamie Foxx's Electro. So I mean, he's you got to have Electro, and the way that he's portrayed in this movie really fixes what they did in the other one. So that's great. So the whole overall story is Peter, you know, wants to have Mysterio for basically say, hey, you ruined my life, and now I'm going to go to Doctor Strange for help. Before we get too much farther into this, I'm going to go ahead and clear the air. There are some fan theories that were actually confirmed in this movie that everybody thought was going to happen. They actually did happen. There are some that did not happen. So, just as a heads up, some of them are true, some of them are not. We'll get to more of those in the spoilers. Let's see. The overall feel of this movie felt really well. It was not your standard Spider-Man movie. But that was a good thing because it was always reinventive. It was always, you know, adding to it. It didn't just stay in one spot and then drag on from there. It was faster paced. It wanted to get the Lost stuff out of the way to get to the more Spider-Man stuff. So, which is great. This movie picks up immediately after Spider-Man Far From Home, which is great. It literally like picks up right where like the exact moment where Far From Home left. There are two end credit scenes, one of which is a trailer, the other which is, if you ask me, it was pointless just because it really was, and we'll get to that when we get to the spoilers. But all in all, I would give this movie a solid 10 out of 10. Because it had everything I wanted and more. And that's not a spoiler, that's just, it had everything I wanted. It had a really good cast, it had a really strong story, it had terrific special effects, and it had dramatic changes and big plot devices that were really well thought out. Sony and Marvel and Disney brought their heads together and they made a phenomenal movie. So, now that that's out of the way, I will say this. I do like this movie, but To me, Spider-Man 2 will always be the best Spider-Man movie ever, just because that's hard to beat. So this is definitely in second place. This is definitely the second best Spider-Man movie, aside from Spider-Man 2002, hands down. Because this is just such a really well thought out film. All of the things that they do for it makes sense. It all makes sense. It's not just, oh, we're gonna pick you, slam you all into a film, and call it a day. That's not what they did here. They thought everything out, and the stuff that they do makes sense. So, okay. Now for spoilers. So, if you have not seen Spider-Man No Way Home, please do not watch the rest of this video until you have seen the rest of the film. Or have seen the movie entirely. So, the trailers are misleading. For instance, there is a particular TV spot and trailer where Doctor Strange says they all die in their own universes fighting Spider-Man. That line is never said in this film. Because, as you know, Sandman did not die in Spider-Man 3, nor did Dr. Connors in Amazing Spider-Man 1. They did not die. Mephisto is not in this film, so, you know, for those of you who are like, oh, Doctor Strange is Mephisto, and it's not really him, it's Doctor Strange. Also, Doctor Strange actually is a much bigger role in this movie than people thought originally. I mean, obviously, you know, everyone thought he was going to be a big role. But everyone's like, well, why did he immediately go for the spell that was going to screw everything up? That line never actually happened. Well, I mean, he does agree to do a spell, but it's not the one that you think. Because originally, Peter's like, hey, can't you just turn back time and freaking, you know, make it to where he didn't do that? And he's like, dude, I don't have the time stone anymore. And even if I could, don't you think we've messed with time enough already from Endgame? So there's a bunch of Endgame references to this movie, which is great. And then Wong is just like off on his own, probably going to the Shang-Chi movie. And not once does he ever say, don't cast that spell. So again, it's misleading. But that's smart on Sony's part because it keeps the movie a mystery. And that's exactly what they should have done. Anything that people have said that, oh, they should have added these two, they got this to the trailer and this to the trailer, trust me, it's much better when they left it a secret. So Doctor Strange comes up with the idea of, oh yeah, well, we'll just make everybody forget that, you know, we did this, and then he pulls a joke on Wong, like, oh, do you remember that party? He's like, no. It's like, well, my point exactly. So, Doctor Strange restarts the spell like 6 times, 5 times, whatever, because Peter wants, you know, certain people to remember that he's Spider-Man, but because, you know, Peter doesn't shut up, obviously the spell goes wrong. And everything goes to shit. Everything goes to shit. Doctor Strange contains the spell. Within that box thing, I'm just going to call it the mystical box thingy. It's the technical term. So when Doctor Strange has the box, it's the spell that's keeping it there. So all he has to do is flip, boop, push the button, and everybody goes home. So Alfred Molina is the first villain to officially be shown on screen, just like he was in the trailer. But it's kind of funny that the way they did it, because they said that he said in an interview that they're taking me from the river, and that's exactly what they did. But in this movie, you know, he's still from the river. You know, he comes up and whatnot, and he destroys the bridge. He's like, where's my machine? You're not Peter Parker, blah, 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 blah. Same thing from the scene in the trailers and whatnot. But then when the nanotech leeches on to Dr. Octopus's arms, Peter immediately synchronizes those bots with it and just freezes him. So freaking Otto's just standing there throwing these weak-looking punches, trying to punch Spider-Man, and he can't move because of the freaking arms. And I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. Because in this movie, Otto is still a bad guy. He hasn't, he doesn't remember the whole, he's right, I'll drown the machine and whatnot. He doesn't remember any of that. None of these guys do. The last thing they remember is they were, getting ready to fight Spider-Man and finish them off, and then poof, they wake up here. They wake up in the MCU. So it's kind of it's kind of like the scene of the end scene, credit scene of Venom 2, where Venom is when Eddie and Venom are in the apartment or hotel room or whatever, and then the whole thing changes and they wake up into the MCU. That's basically what everything happened with in this movie. So Norman is the next person to show up. He's obviously attacking the bridge. Well, then they capture Otto, or Strange captures Otto and has already caught the Lizard, and then Spider-Man turns his suit inside out to reveal the black and gold suit, and then goes out and captures Sandman and Electro. Like I said earlier, Electro is much better in this film than he is in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Because, for one, he's not blue, and it's just way, way better. Sandman was really good. The only thing I think I would have to complain about with Sandman is when he went human, he didn't go human. Like, he was still sand-colored. So, the whole movie, it's not Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman, it's just a CGI Thomas Hayden Church dressed as Sandman, or digitally altered to look like Sandman. So that's a little weird because that wasn't in Spider-Man 3, but I get it. It's the MCU. They all have to have some kind of upgrade. And then once Spider-Man catches them, he goes back looking for Norman. And then Aunt May calls from the Feast Foundation and says, "Hey, I got one of those people that you're looking for," and he bolts to the freaking. I'm sorry about the lighting. I don't know what it is. My camera does that from time to time. But anyway, so he runs all the way to the freaking Feast Foundation, and you see William Dafoe dressed up essentially like a hobo, and he has no memory of anything. He doesn't remember the glider impacting him, killing him. He has no memory of that. But prior to that, you see him taking off his mask and he puts it on a dumpster, and then the Goblin and whatever, they start talking back and forth and whatnot, just like Spider-Man 1 when he's on the ground. He's like, how do I beat him up? How do I kill him? And it's basically that. But then Norman gets control and he breaks the Goblin helmet. So that was perfect. And then he hides the glider really badly and everything. So it definitely is a little fun little moment. So, and then once Norman is in, the Sanctum Sanctorum, locked up with everybody else, Otto Octavius immediately recognizes him. And it's like, dude, you died. Everything else. And then Strange reveals that, Octavius, Electro, and William Dafoe all die fighting Spider-Man. And then Spider-Man, runs away from Doctor Strange and then traps him in the mirror dimension, which I thought was hysterical. And then tries to save everybody. But then Green Goblin becomes full Green Goblin. And the whole point of the Doctor Strange getting locked in the mirror dimension is Spider-Man was trying to cure the villains so that way when they went back to their own universes, it didn't kill them. And which is great because that just shows that how much Spider-Man tries to help everybody, even if they don't deserve it. But what's really sad is when Green Goblin fully takes over Norman, he uses his glider the same way that he did in the first movie, trying to kill Peter, but Aunt May was the one in front of the door when the glider comes through. So she got hit by the glider, and it injured her. And that this is the scene that almost made me cry. Goblin escapes. He throws the bomb. Peter tries to, get it away from Aunt May. Was not successful, and she doesn't die immediately, but she does die in Peter's arms. And it's just a very sad moment, and they finally do the whole great power, great responsibility speech, which is what Uncle Ben does, which begs the question, is Uncle Ben dead in Tom Holland's Spider-Man universe? Because as we'll talk about later, everyone else's is dead. So is his? So who knows? But even though it has basically been confirmed that Tobey Maguire is going to be playing Uncle Ben in Tom Holland's next Spider-Man, whatever it's going to do, which is great. Peter goes off and he starts mourning. Ned has the sling ring thing that Doctor Strange does to open portals. And he says, "Find Spider-Man." Now this is a big spoiler, so if you've watched it up to this point, don't watch the rest of this. As soon as he opens the portal, you see a Spider-Man that has bigger lenses than Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And lo and behold, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man walks through the portal, and it's like, where am I? And everything. And it's just the whole theater lit up. It was everyone was just like, oh my god, and everything else. And then MJ said, oh, you're not really Spider-Man. He literally puts his hand up and pulls himself up from the ceiling, and they just start arguing back and forth. And then Ned does the thing again. He's like, bring me Peter Parker, or take me to Peter Parker. And then Tobey Maguire himself, the real true Spider-Man, comes back in the MCU dressed as Peter Parker. And it was the roof of that theater came off as soon as Tobey Maguire walked through the portal. Which he had already apparently known what was going on. He was like, oh, I need to talk with your Peter and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, you just got here. And how do you already know this? So, I'm so sorry about that. Here, I'm going to try that and see if that helps. But, that didn't help at all. So, but yeah, the roof of the theater just came off when Tobey Maguire walks through the portal. I was like, yes! And I was clapping really, really loud. And it was a really good scene. But then both, former Spider-Men basically tell Tom Holland, saying, hey, you can't do this without sacrifice. You can't save everybody. In Tobey Maguire's case, he couldn't save Uncle Ben. He couldn't save Harry Osborn. And they mention both of them. So that's even better. He mentions Venom from his universe. Andrew Garfield mentions that he couldn't save Uncle Ben and he couldn't save Gwen Stacy. And then they start working together and figuring out ways to cure the other villains. And then the funniest thing I think I'd ever seen in this film is Tom Holland's working on his web fluid, and Tobey Maguire's like, "What's that?" And Tom is like, "This is my web fluid for my web shooter. You don't have that?" He's like, Pfft. It just scares the crap out of both Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland. And Andrew's like, "Oh my god, how does that work?" And it was just a really funny scene. And then they go to the Statue of Liberty with all their tools and whatever ready to go. And then that's when they had the whole the leaked footage of Andrew Garfield with his arm on the rail and whatnot. And he doesn't say web blood like everyone thinks he does. He says web block or something, but because it looked like he said web blood instead of web block, it makes sense. It's total misperception. And then the fight at the Statue of Liberty was just awesome. Because since Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire have never worked as on a team, and Tom Holland has, I always thought that was funny. He's like, I joined the Avengers. And Tobey Maguire's like, great! Who are they? I started laughing. It was so funny. Because, it makes sense. They're not in that universe. But what's funny is Tobey Maguire didn't recognize Doctor Strange, despite Spider-Man 2 saying Doctor Strange as a name for Dr. Octopus, and basically confirming that there is a Doctor Strange in that universe. But who knows? But then, they one by one, they cure all of the villains. Otto Octavius was the first one. And this is before the other two Spider-Men show up. And they fix the inhibitor chip on his neck. He becomes a good guy again. A full-out good guy this time. And then, MJ falls off the scaffolding. Tom Holland, they did not edit that trailer in the trailer. He does reach for him, but then Goblin shows up and hits him in the side, but then Andrew Garfield runs and jumps and catches MJ, redeeming himself for Gwen Stacy, which is just such a sweet moment. And then, Tobey Maguire, I thought Tobey Maguire was going to save Ned because he did save his friend. But Doctor Strange does that by sending the Cloak of Levitation over there. And then all the villains get cured. But just before he does, Goblin stabs Tobey Maguire with a gauntlet thing. And I'm like, oh my god, if they kill Tobey Maguire, I'm going to hate this movie. And they didn't, which is great, because I was so afraid that they were going to have Tobey Maguire Spider-Man die. But they didn't. And then, Norman gets cured. He's like, oh my god, what did I do? Freaking Andrew Garfield has, Tobey over his shoulder and whatnot. He's like, you're in a lot of pain. And Tobey's like, yep. They were just it was just, they were going back and forth and whatnot. It was a real fun moment. And Tom Holland's Peter actually almost killed Green Goblin because Green Goblin killed Aunt May. And then Tobey Maguire actually gets in front of the glider and stops it with no effort. And he's like, ah, ah. Freaking Tobey's just standing there like, please. So I always thought that was funny because, to be fair, Tobey Maguire has lifted heavier things than Tom Holland's Spider-Man ever has. I think the heaviest he's ever done was the elevator and the boat. Okay, take that back. Maybe Tom Holland actually did have the heavier load, but at least Iron Man swooped in and helped him with that. And then Tobey Maguire had to stop a train by himself. So I'm pretty sure that actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure Tobey Maguire had the worst end of that, or the worst out of them. But, they basically just, say, hey, killing him is not going to fix anything. Aunt May's still dead and blah, 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 blah. Then Tom Holland's like, you know what? Go ahead and fix the spell. Do what you need to do. If they forget me, they forget me. And then Strange, he does. He does the spell, and as soon as they do, all the villains go back to their universes and timelines. And then both Spider-Men do. And which begs the question, could Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come back in future Spider-Man films? Or in the Multiverse of Madness? So who knows? But it was definitely a real fun movie. It was a little bit weird because Tobey Maguire actually did look older. In this movie, they didn't digitally de-age him like they did Alfred Molina and Thomas Hayden Church and William Dafoe. They didn't digitally de-age them. Or didn't digitally de-age Tobey Maguire. Which makes sense because at that point when he comes through, he's been Spider-Man for probably well after Spider-Man 3. So it makes sense that he'd be a little older. And honestly, Tobey Maguire just doesn't age anyway. But he definitely looked a little smaller than he did. He definitely lost some muscle mass. But you know what? That's what happens when you don't play a character for 17 plus years, or almost 17 years. So it makes sense. But all the characters were really well thought out. All of the special effects were really good. It's really cool how they tied in everything. And then, this movie actually made me respect Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man a little bit more. Because I didn't like the second movie of his. That I've said that multiple times. I did not like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I did like Amazing Spider-Man 1. So it's kind of nice that they had basically that all get tied together. And then, they basically reference all, if not most, of the Tobey Maguire stuff as well. So it's kind of a whole little nice bunch of mess, essentially is what it is. Because this whole movie was a fun Spider-Man collaboration, Spider-Verse, whatever you want to call it. It was phenomenal. And then the pointless end credit scene, which technically isn't pointless, but we'll get to that in a second. At the end of Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, Eddie and Venom are in this hotel room or whatever, and Venom's talking about how symbiotes or whatever go from dimension to dimension and whatnot, and then the whole room shapeshifts around because of the spell of Spider-Man No Way Home. Then the end credit scene cuts to Eddie Brock in a Mexican bar, and he's talking to the dude who's serving drinks. And both Eddie and Venom are drunk off their asses. And he's like, maybe we should go see that Spider-Man kid now. Well, because they fixed the spell, and everyone went back to their original universe, Eddie and Venom both go back to their universe, but a tiny sliver of Venom stays in the MCU. Which hints at possibly Spider-Man 4 having Venom finally having Spider-Man get a black suit, aside from turning his inside out. Speaking of suits, holy crap, the ending of this movie just blew me away, because they finally had Tom Holland's Spider-Man use a sewing machine and make his own suit, and the suit that he makes is as close to the comic books as you can get. Light blue colors, dark blue or dark red for the red part of his suit, and it looked really, really good, and I cannot wait to see it come back in another movie. Even though I'm sure it's just gonna get covered by black goo, but still, very fun. I hope that we get to see more Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in later future Marvel movies as their respected Spider-Man, and as well as having Tobey Maguire come back as Uncle Ben, because that would be so good. But this movie was seriously 10 out of 10. I would not change a thing. The only thing I would really change is having Aunt May die, but to be fair, they had to do that because every form of Spider-Man has to have that great power, great responsibility speech by one of Peter's, aunts and uncles in this case. So it's kind of a little twist between it being Uncle Ben, but this case it was May. So it really did work out. It does suck to see her die because I really did like her as Aunt May. But she definitely went out the way I'm sure she was supposed to. So, well, obviously because, that's how it was in the movie. So anyway, that's basically it. That is my Spider-Man No Way Home freaking movie review. I absolutely enjoyed this movie, and I guarantee you when it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray, I am buying this shit. So, like I said before, I don't usually see movies in the theaters, but oh my god, I had to see this one because even if I hadn't heard rumors that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire were gonna come back, this movie just still looked really good regardless. Plus, it has Alfred Molina back as Green Goblin, or Otto Octavius, and then it's got William Dafoe coming back as the Green Goblin. So it's a win-win. It's a total win-win. Even if Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were not in this movie, it would still have been fine. But obviously it's way more fun and way more exciting to have that fan service of, yes, 2 more generations of Spider-Man are coming into the MCU, and now it ties everything together. So basically, when you think about it, the MCU started in 2002, which is phenomenal. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will catch you guys all next time on Ultimate Deadpool. I do have 2 more parts of the Day the World Ended filmed and ready to go, so expect those before too long, and I will catch you guys all later. Bye.